Bruce, Harrell, it's good to see you.
Nice seeing you too. Thanks for having me.
We are honored to have you. Booked and I are going to go back and forth on some questions. We're here at Chophouse, which is part of the Cloud Room and the constellation of businesses that are all kind of part of what makes Seattle really special. Great to have this conversation. Bruce, tell me, when did you decide to run for mayor, and who was part of that decision?
When did I decide?
Yeah, when did you decide?
Well, I suppose it was about 3 months ago.
Yep.
And it was a slow decision in that I had retired from politics and had given this city 12 of my prime years, I would add, in elected office, and I was very proud of the legislative record and the budgetary decisions we made. When George Floyd was murdered, and I think the country and perhaps the world for the first time, for many, it had seen such a brutal murder, and then they started to realize the issues of race and social justice. And at the same time, they looked at businesses that had been around for 20 or 30 years go out of business. That I started getting calls from all over, from social justice warriors, people I've worked with, from small business owners, and they were looking at the city's current status, and quite frankly, my phone was ringing off the hook. And I talked it over with my wife of 30 years, and I said, I hope they find the right mayor. And that's literally what I said, and I started fielding calls from potential candidates. And over the course of several weeks, as I do in all cases, I talk to those who I really trust and who I really love, and I put things in prayer. And I talked to my wife once again, and then I made that decision. And then we announced about 2 weeks later at Garfield, which I thought appropriate, and haven't turned back since.
Thank you.
In your opinion, what makes a good mayor, and what are some examples of effective mayors that you can share with us?
So I think what makes a good mayor is one that listens first, that doesn't come across as knowing all the answers, that understands both the common touch from someone that has fallen through the cracks in our society, but also is not intimidated by talking to some of the most powerful leaders. And in those combinations of conversations, and everyone in between, I think has ability to converse with folks authentically, to do the hard work, which is the research and looking at the data. And I always say in any group that I've led or any group that I've followed in, typically the leaders are the hardest workers. And in life, nothing's come easy for me. So I try to out-hustle everybody. I try to get up early and go to bed later. And always motivated by the corny things in life, which are to me faith and love and compassion. I think that kind of conversation has been missing from politics, that I think that it's combat warfare, that people are demonizing one another often. And I could stand toe-to-toe with anyone if they want to talk about social justice, they want to talk about racism, they want to talk about unfairness. They want to look at a balance sheet and figure out how to make a business prosperous. They want to look at technology solutions. I can go toe-to-toe with anyone because I know I'm not the smartest in the room. But I will say, let me get back to you because I want to do some research on that. Or I really am astounded by how you solve that issue. I think what will make an effective mayor is one that truly leads with an authentic spirit of humility and unity and collaboration, and quite frankly, just not afraid to make a mistake, to be decisive. And when I talk about sports, which has served me well in life, I always told people I was, yes, an aggressive football player, because I knew what needed to be done and I did it. And in politics, I'm much the same way. I will calibrate and weigh things out only because these issues are complex. But at the end of the day, it's got to get done. And I think that's what we're seeing is in action. So I think authenticity, decisiveness, kindness, humility are all the ingredients of a strong mayor. Now, going back on who's been a strong and an effective mayor, in all due respect to the question, I sometimes stray away from it because I think in all of the mayors, they did some great things. I've been critical of some of the things they did not do, but I don't draw energy from that. So I go back to Wes Ullman, who's a supporter of mine, because Wes Ullman was a mayor when I was the young sister's age. Lucy, is that her name?
That's correct.
When I was Lucy's age, hi Lucy, Mayor Ullman, Wes Ullman was the mayor. And he appointed the first African-American fire chief, the first African-American parks superintendent. he was dealing with racial strife and injustice, and they were crazy times, and the whole race discussion was surfacing after the Civil Rights War. So he's a friend, and I like the way he navigated through that. But certainly there's been, I think, good accomplishments in every mayor since. And like I said, I'll pull him out of the crowd, and I would say Norm Rice too, who's a supporter of mine, and we had lunch just a few blocks from here a couple of months ago. Norm's a dear friend, but you know, I try to look at the best from the best, and draw energy from what they've done. So, but those two friends, I think were effective mayors.
Thank you.
So Bruce, what pressing issue facing Seattle has not received enough attention so far in the mayor's race?
Okay, so just to answer the question, I think, better, that the issue of homelessness, the issue of police reform and effective public safety, and the issue of business revitalization is getting a lot of attention.
Correct.
So I'm hearing another question.
Yeah, what hasn't?
So
What's missing?
I would say education. I would say to some extent climate change, although we had a great forum last night.
Great.
But those first three issues are sort of the tail wagging the dog. But I would say education and climate change, and to some extent transportation. But transportation is probably the top fourth there as well.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is because I talk a lot about education, because when we talk about Black Lives Matter and we talk about unreasonable force, and we say particularly in the African American community that we will make sure that this country understands unreasonable force and fatal force will not be used against African American communities. I get that, and I will do everything within my power to establish that. But that's still a low barometer. That's still a low measurement, because we still have health disparities and educational disparities and job opportunities where we are lacking. Our net worth is behind. So in addition to that, not in lieu of that, we have to aggressively address those issues. And that's why I'm introducing what's called a Race and Data Initiative, which really looks at all of these issues from a data perspective. As a technology lawyer, I love using data to shape policy and create action. So in education, which to me is how I got off these streets. I mean, I grew up not too far from here. It was my ability to learn and to be around good teachers through the Seattle public school system that I'm a product of, which allowed me to get accepted to Ivy League schools and do all the things that I wanted to do and go to the University of Washington. That is going to truly be one of our strongest strategies, understanding that the city doesn't control it, but the city could do so much to partner with the school district. So that's probably a key issue that hasn't gotten a lot of attention.
Bukta, can I do a follow-up?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Bukta, do you have a couple kids who've gone through Seattle Public Schools, correct?
Yes.
You're bringing up an issue where Seattle, besides the families and education levy, has a distinct lack of engagement in the school district. And you might hear from others, as we hear, that the governance of the school board and the leadership of the school district has gone through a lot of flux and challenge. What would you change in your first couple years as mayor to make that a more dynamic relationship and to raise more spirits and more hopes for the success of the district and the success of students matriculating through it?
Yeah. So first thing, I do have a great relationship with the current superintendent, Dr. Brent Jones. I've known him for 40 years, and I actually was his personal attorney negotiating his contract with the district. So, and I've always told my children and younger folks that you will be where you want to be, or where you will end up in 5 years based on who you know and what you read. And relationships are critical. And so I'm fortunate to have good relationships with the school board and with the current superintendent. Now, having said that, what can we do?
Yeah.
The first thing is the role of the counselor in schools are critical. There never is enough funding for good counselors in middle school and high school. And it's sort of the thing that at least changed my life, because I spent a lot of time talking to counselors about what you can become. And counselors could sort of make or break careers. They could limit the vision or create the vision. And we hear stories about how many times a counselor said, you can't be a lawyer, you can't be a doctor, you go into the trades. And there's nothing wrong with going into the trades, but there is something wrong with always limiting someone's dreams. So what we're going to create is a Seattle Empowerment and Opportunity Program, where I will get all of these great mentors out here. We literally have 50,000 counselors out there in all walks of life, whether it's apprenticeships or software or music or art or small business. Many of them can lend their time and energy and vision setting with young people. So I'm interested in starting a new partnership with the school district where we can do everything that they're not doing. Another example, so creating a mentorship program to help with career guidance. Making sure we actually pay. Now, you may recall that the Seattle Promise was my idea, that people argued that the city should not pay for tuition. I said that's the largest impediment for people going to college, and while the state doesn't fully fund, we need to get in the game, whether we're raising philanthropic dollars or our sub-fund money. Let's get in the game, and that's what we're doing now through our soda tax. Equally important, not only just funding, not only just mentors, but meeting the district and the counselors and the administrators where they are. What are your needs? What can't you do? For example, the PTSA in schools. I was the auction chair, my wife and I, at Cleveland High School. Our daughter graduated from Cleveland, and she just received her master's degree just 3 weeks ago. We were active all 4 years in raising money for the PTSA. This money went right to kids' computers and to athletic supplies and for teachers to help out with resources. Many of these teachers, they're not paid enough. They're going in their pockets to help these kids. That's real dollars that could result in changing lives. And so you're going to see, again, the city could put structure around these ancillary activities to really get to the students and get to the teachers. So you're going to see new partnerships, a new energy, by the way, not, hey, that's their domain, this is ours. It is critical to the success of this city.
What's your personal relationship with Amazon as a consumer? Are you a shareholder, a prime member, a former employee? What's your relationship?
Yeah, and I guess I'm like everyone else I know. I do use e-commerce not just on Amazon, but on many search engines that are out there to do some consuming, which I think is almost responsible for half the consumer activities. I don't have a personal relationship with them. I quite frankly, I have a pretty comprehensive portfolio, and I don't know if I own Amazon stock or not, so I don't want to punt on that one. My financial statements are out there so they can look to see. I mean, you have to list everything, so I don't know that piece, but I will tell you that I have many friends that work at Amazon at either entry-level positions or in warehouses or in management, upper management. And what I like about Amazon and what I don't like about Amazon, I'll just be candid with you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of known for my candor. What I like about it, the fact is that they bring jobs here, and they are a job creator, and they are a part of our tax base that we rely on as a business entity. And I believe that cities coming out of COVID, there will be winners and losers. Those that can create and sustain jobs and have a pipeline into good employees like Lucy and others, they will win in cities and they'll be vibrant. And the losers will, through policy and action, can hurt their economy and jobs will go elsewhere. What I don't like about Amazon is I'm not convinced they have been the strongest corporate citizen they could be through their corporate social responsibility goals, through their philanthropic dollars, through truly aligning with the needs of a city. I think they are responsible for, and this is the rules of the system for a lot of brick and mortar institutions going out of business. And I believe that you have a moral obligation, not just a legal obligation, to concern yourself with the damages that you have caused directly or indirectly. So if you have extracted $1 billion from Amazon for whatever reason, playing by the rules, and you continue to see people living in cars, or you continue to see a brick and mortar institution that is out of business, then you must say to yourself, you know, perhaps how I gained is how they lost. And I will be the mayor to have that discussion publicly. I don't demonize anyone. If you play by the rules, you're playing by the rules. They need to pay their fair share of taxes. But I need them to look at what has happened in an e-commerce city, and we are an e-commerce city. So that's the way I approach Amazon, and that's what describes my relationship with them.
Mukta, you're back up because I think I'm going to skip that next one.
Because you've answered it.
Yeah.
What do you think is the best run department in the city of Seattle, and which department, setting aside SPD for a moment, do you think needs your attention early on as our new mayor?
Ooh, I thought these were going to be light questions. Now that's a tough one. So which one is the
Yeah, what's running strong? You know a lot about the city.
I do. So I hadn't thought about that though. The best run, and where could some repairs be? Okay, best run. I'm going to say the fire department. The fire department, I think that I'll just say hum a few bars that I've seen them in action saving lives indiscriminately. I've seen them treat everyone like they're the CEO of a major company, irrespective of who they are. And I know how committed they are when they take their oath to serve. And I think they take it very seriously. And they do philanthropic work in the community and raise money for good funds. So I'm going to stop there and now go to the other side of the question, which is, and you said, let's not talk about the police department. So it's something other than the police department. I'm going to say what used to be the Department of Planning and Development now is Office of Planning and Community Development. I'll say for people to understand that the permitting process for housing and construction. I think that they have heard for years that the process needs to be streamlined, that delays of years ultimately it costs the person trying to buy the house, but it certainly costs the person who are developing. And there are best practices out there, there's technology out there, there's use of cloud services out there, and it could be streamlined, and I look forward to streamlining that process because at the end of the day, that will help us achieve affordable housing. So I'll use those as two examples. On the fly, by the way.
Those
are good questions.
Kenny stored his ears.
I'll probably go home tonight and say, oh, I might have said this or that, but I'll stick with those right
That's
now.
good, thank you.
Bruce, this next question could have a 2-word or a 3-word answer.
Okay.
Everyone we've talked to has been able to give us an answer, and we've been impressed. New York City just finished a ranked choice election. If King County had ranked choice voting, and it looks like we may soon, thank you, Gurmai, who would you pick as your number 2, assuming you are your number 1? And you brought the football analogy up. Takes a team, somebody else who's running, who's captured your attention. Who's your number 2? Two words, no, just
So my 2 words would be, I pass. I know everyone else probably gave you an answer, but I say positive things about all of them, and I want to calibrate them. Usually I don't even speak about them, so I'm going to pass on that one if that's within the rules. To be candid with you, and I think you want candor on the show, right?
Sure.
That I watch these Twitter wars, and they're going after and saying all this bad stuff about each other, about me, and you don't see any of that coming from my campaign, because I will run our election the way I will serve as mayor. And they talk about I'm collaborative and I'm bringing out the best in people, then all of a sudden they tweet this stuff and it's just foul, and I'm like, I don't thrive off of that. So for me to pick a second or third running mate just sort of gets attention, and you know what? And I want the young people watching this to realize this. You have to challenge the rules. Your rule was pick 1 or 2, but I push back because when I see rules that I don't agree with, I don't play by the rules. And so I'm not going to answer the question in all due respect.
Thank you, Bruce. That's okay. We'll move on.
That's the way we'll handle that one.
Bukta?
Let's shift to talk about policing. Policing has become an extremely divisive issue in our community. What is a roadmap for policing that you feel like would be compelling to the entire city of Seattle's communities?
So I will say I think this distinguishes my candidacy from all of the 15 people, because I grew up on these streets and in the 60s and 70s, and I know its culture. At the same time, I had police officers at my kickoff, and I believe I'm the only one that has surrounded themselves around kickoff, police officers at a forum. And my roadmap is somewhat simple, because I think we already have many use of force policies in place. We have an accountability system with the Inspector General and the OPA's office and investigators investigating use of force. We're under a federal consent decree. I do not think we need another procedural change. What we need to figure out is how do we truly change the culture? And I talk a lot about culture, and cultures can be changed. The first thing you do is you articulate that. We are changing the culture. We are reestablishing the norms. And so when I said at a kickoff I wanted people to watch the George Floyd video, people made fun of that and said, that's his answer to reform. They missed the whole point. The whole point of that is, if an officer looks at that video and they can't agree that that was cold-blooded murder, that was inhumane, that if they can't agree on that as a baseline, I don't want that person on the force. That person should not be on the force. Okay? You can't train that person what the oath should be. And how you change culture, number one, is you find the informal leaders in an organization. Sometimes they are not a captain or a sergeant. They are the people around the locker room who people look to for advice and for excitement. And you start making sure those people are empowered to say what they celebrate and what they denounce. And when you see something you denounce it with your heart and your soul. So when you see John Williams murdered, you come out and say, I don't believe in the code of silence. This man was murdered as he was. When you saw George Floyd murdered, you say he was murdered. That will not happen here in Seattle. You do not see that. You make sure it starts with the captain, the sergeant, the chief, the rank and file, the mayor, and you start talking about what's expected. And it starts with recruiting, what kind of skill sets you want. I want people that understand de-escalation. I want people who are culturally competent. So we're going to change the culture, not necessarily the policies. I was the sole sponsor of the bias-free policing law to understand who gets stopped and who gets the free pass. I use data to inform our decisions. We will continue to do that work, but what we have to do is change the culture, and that's where the mayor has to be the loudest one talking about culture change. And I've done this effectively in organizations. I took a lot of applied behavioral science and went back and got a master's degree in this area, so I'm pretty passionate about organizational design and improvement. I wrote my thesis, my master's thesis, on creating passion in the workplace for change.
Bruce,
Thank you.
following up on that, you talked about data. You read the Seattle Times article about overtime. The data there doesn't reflect well on the police department. So my question is twofold. One, how do we not continue to add things to people's unfavorable impression of the police department? And then during early in a Harrell administration, you would be seeking a new chief of police. Whose counsel would you seek in making that decision?
So on the building community trust, and first of all, the data on the salaries was interesting on how it surfaced. I believe, and I could be wrong on this.
Yeah.
I always give my permission to be wrong, so
Hey.
I'll take it.
We'll edit the tape.
It's okay, you don't have to edit it. But I think that was surfaced because of a Seattle Times article,
Yeah.
a deep dive through state disclosure requests. Where it should surface from, quite frankly, are the policy leaders, the city council, the mayor. We need to just surface it. And if people are gaming the system, some of them are making $300,000-$400,000 a year, they should know, and they're playing along the rules, we should know whether that's appropriate, how else we could, whether that makes fiscal sense, because I would suggest it does not.
Yeah.
So we need to surface the data, number one. Now, how do we, the second part of your question is, how do we
Chief of
build
police.
trust? Well,
Chief of police,
I
yeah.
think you talked a little bit about community
Yeah,
trust.
trust,
too.
you got it.
So I have some wacky ideas, and when I come out with wacky ideas, some people just stuck on the, you have to humanize these police officers. We had like Detective Cookie, they call her,
Yeah.
Denise Bolden. She does an outstanding job. She's trusted in communities, right? What she does is she gets to know them on a personal basis. So I want to see our officers at basketball games, at soccer games, at football games, talking it up with young people, throwing a football around, kicking a soccer ball. I want to see them at halftime playing basketball and clowning around with the people to humanize that, and I want them to be able to tell people why they became a police officer. So I want to see these relationships, and you're going to see money in the budget to create that kind of environment, where officers are not standing around with their arms in the closed position with sunglasses on, looking at people as though everyone's a threat. No, they're going to look at everyone as though they're a possible constituent or a brother or a sister. And so you're going to see me coaching that in our, as we change the culture. Police chief, I will turn to community activists, business leaders, parents. I mean, I will have a well-rounded consortium of people, accountability experts in a room with me, and we will find the best of the best. I've never been a police officer. I don't even play one on TV. But I know an effective leader when I see one. I've been around some great ones. And so it will be taken very seriously because that's going to be one of the most important parts. Carmen Best. I'll talk to Carmen Best, who's a dear friend of mine. And I think, again, how she was treated by the current council was unconscionable. Okay. So Carmen is a friend who I also rely on in this process.
Thank you.
In thinking about ourselves as a region, how would you go about building a more effective partnership with King County Executive and the other cities in King County? And what is your vision for a more cohesive and equitable region?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, it's about relationships. And I have some pretty strong relationships with most of the surrounding mayors and King County Council persons and the King County Executive, very fruitful relationships. And as they all know, I served on the Puget Sound Executive council for, I don't know, I think 8 years or so in different regional organizations. As they all know, I bring levity to a room because, I've held people's hands when they've gotten bad news from an oncologist, and I've held people's hands as they've transitioned. And if we are all here and we're able to smile, then this is a good thing. And so in my relationship building with people, I don't try to act like I know the answers. They all went into elected office for the same reason, to serve and do good work. So I will be so intentional about building those relationships, and I think I have a good base to begin with. Quite frankly, I think of the candidates, I have the strongest relationships with the regional folks. Now, they have to understand that Seattle is the largest city in this state, and that we are a mega center in terms of job creation and the business environment, and we're the tail that wags the dog often. And because of that, in Olympia, sometimes we are not highly favored. So in our surrounding jurisdictions, we have to understand their pain points. We have to understand what their fears are, what their concerns are. We can't go into their jurisdiction and simply say, you better care about Seattle. We better show the same care for Ording, Washington, or Renton, Washington, as we are asking them to care about Seattle. And so I will lead with that approach. Last I checked, when I drove through Renton, I didn't see a hard boundary or line. And I have friends that live all around this region. In fact, a lot of people I grew up in the Central District have moved out south. Mm-hmm. So I have friends all over, and I'm going to tap into those friendships to develop those relationships that are needed.
Thank you.
Coach Carl, or Coach Clara in our case, has whispered in my ear that the shot clock is running down.
Okay.
So we're going to get some crisp answers.
Okay, that's when I start shooting bricks, when I rush my shot.
No, you got it. Really quickly, just name the business. What mid-size or small Seattle employer do you admire, especially when it comes to their approach to equity, employee compensation, diversity? Just name
Two,
what you could.
Molly Moons and two de Bellas.
Okay, great, thank you.
See, I can do that.
That you do it, done,
Okay.
boom, 3 point.
If we talk to the people who worked for you, what would they identify as your best and your worst qualities as a manager and leader?
They will say I listen well, that I try to allow them to succeed, I give them discretion, and I'm trusting. They'll say those good things, and the bad thing, they will say I have a tendency to be impatient sometimes because I don't like problems to fester. And if there's data out there, let's get the data and let's make the decision. So I think often I could be more patient in my decision making. Is what they say. And I will say, I will counter that, but that's what they may say.
One area
Thank
we
you.
don't want you to be overly patient is strategies for an equitable recovery for the city. Give us one kind of piece that we could hang our hat on that you would push out to help us rebuild Seattle.
So I'll give you two pieces.
Okay.
The Seattle Job Center that I talked about creating earlier is a method by which we will create a brand new department. And if you need employees, and employees need to find jobs, I don't care whether they're using LinkedIn or whatever they're using, Indeed, the Washington State Employment Office, is all going to be centralized. And then people, whether they're middle-aged, mature, young, they'll see all of the training and apprenticeships and internships all in one database. Very easy to use, especially we can link employees and employers together. It's going to be a game changer in this city because we're also going to find ways to fund people to tap into their gifts, whatever their gifts are. So, and we're going to find, in addition to the mentoring program, people are going to be able to find their gifts because that's what's struggling a lot. I will tell you that the people in those tents out there that we're seeing, no one ever told them about their gifts. No one nurtured that light in them that we all have. So you're going to see a different approach through our Seattle Job Center. What was the other?
Oh, that's good.
Okay, I'll
You
stop
got it.
there.
We're near the finish line.
Okay, I'm still shooting.
You've talked a lot about racial equity and anti-racism. Can you talk about your vision for building a city where everyone belongs?
Yeah, and again, I think I have a unique perspective there. I think, I'm of mixed heritage, Japanese American and African American, and I celebrate diversity. I mean, I want to know your culture, the food you like to eat, your faith background, your family background. I don't want to know because I'm nosy. I want to know because I want to appreciate who and what you are. But I believe in that discussion, it must lead to what we have in common. That the path toward enlightenment, for me at least, is that path toward commonality. I don't want to get stuck in our differences. And there's so much, I will leave here, for example, and I will go to the celebration in the Ethiopian community from here. And I've been to Africa, and I've been to the Asian continent, I've been around this world. I've been fortunate to be able to do that. And I'm just starving for that kind of knowledge. And I think that in the race discussion now, that we're seeing the need for equity. People are hungry for equity because they're realizing that a lot of what we see that is not equitable is a result of hundreds and hundreds of years of perhaps systemic discrimination. Maybe there's no one with a Klan hat on making decisions, but our system design is inadequate. So in my race and data initiative, we're going to cover all of that. But I tell people when we celebrate, in the race discussion, I never knew where I personally fit in. Or you're black, you're Japanese, you're Hawaiian, you look Hawaiian to me, Bruce. And so I always looked at it as an outsider. And I would try to understand, well, I wonder what he or she is saying and what this person's saying. Even in the LGBTQ experience with those that I love that identify that particular experience, I want to understand how it must be in that world. That's going to be the race and social justice work we're going to do. We're going to really find out what's common in our experience, because I could tell you that that's where you see vulnerability, which is good. And we don't need to be like this, we need to be like this. I know these are hokey things for a mayor to talk about, but I don't care, quite frankly. I'm not running, this is not a stepping stone for me. I love politics. So you're not going to see someone that is scared to speak truth to power, to show vulnerability. But we're going to change the city, we're going to change the narrative, and we're all going to be better for it.
Thank you.
Bruce, if you look at Nam, you look at Lucky, Clara, Lucy, there's a lot of undecided people out there, people just paying attention to the election now. If they are deciding between two, if they like the cut of your jib but aren't sure, what is it that would lead them to pick you?
Well, that is a good question.
That's our last one.
I would hope that they could see in my words and in my face and in my heart authenticity. When you were born in a city, you've been your entire life, you can't fake some things. You just can't fake it. And so in my candidacy, I don't talk about things I did in New York or Boston or any of these other places. I talk about what I did right here. From coaching kids out here to challenging the University of Washington for their investments in South Africa when I was in college, to tutoring inmates in Monroe as a student. I tried to live a life of service to prepare for this moment. And if they are going to walk away with one thing, because the stakes are so high, I like them to say, you know, we need to give that guy a shot, because he's got high energy. This guy's got high energy, and he's creative, and he seems to be authentic. So I want them to see that in what I do and what I say, and we'll get through this together.
We know how busy you are. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us. We appreciate your time.
It was absolutely my pleasure.
And best of luck to you.
Thank you very much.